gonna swim, bike, and run. In the corner sun, we're gonna swim, bike, and run. In the corner sun, 2021.
Thank you, Poncho Man. Welcome back, everybody. Breakfast with Bob, not quite Kona edition. My name is Bob Babbitt. We're brought to you by Clash USA, Credo Tri, UCAN, Hoka, One Velofix, Normatec Canyon Bikes, and of course, our Challenged Athletes Foundation. We just sent out 3,038 grants totaling $5.1 million to keep challenged athletes in the game of life through sport. And speaking of challenged athletes, we have the National Paracycling Championships coming up in beautiful Boise. And our race director, Mr. Mike Cooley, joins us. Mike, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's an honor to have you on. And I think we've traveled in the same circles for a lot of years because you co-owned George's Cycles for more than 40 years?
That's correct.
Wow. And then recently, did you retired from there?
Yeah, my partner and I decided 40 was enough, and we sold it to a younger couple, and we're off and running with race promotion and bike riding.
So when you got into this, and I can't imagine that there were a ton of cyclists around 40 years ago, what led you guys to starting a bike shop?
Actually started, racing bicycles as an amateur, obviously, and a junior back in the early or mid 70s. And I frequented the bike store that we later bought and operated for 40 years. And along with that, we helped create quite a few cycling events to help push the sport along.
Well, and one in particular, the Ore-Ida Women's Challenge, because they're, when you look back, you had in terms of men's events, it was always Tour de France, but the women always got the sort of the short end of the stick that really didn't have a lot of events for them. Creating something like the Ore-Ida Women's Challenge, how important was that to you? Well,
that was the catalyst that basically launched Boise into kind of a cycling mecca, and an outdoor sports opportunity place. Women were the huge benefactor of that, and they deserved it. There was nothing for them prior to that, not even in Europe. I mean, right. It was basically the very first multi-day stage race that were, the women could come in. We actually, it was sort of a coincidence, but that was the very first time that women were offered a road race in the Olympics in '84.
Yes, and with Connie Carpenter out sprinting Rebecca Twigg for the gold medal. That was a pretty cool time.
Yeah, it was. And Rebecca actually came to the first edition, as well as many others, but she won that first edition. Connie did not make it to Boise for that event. But yeah, they went on, and the race grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think it had a 19-year run.
And then you did the Bogus Basin Hill Climb and Boise Twilight Criterium and road race. Talk a little bit about just the importance of events. I've always felt that people underestimate that if you want to grow a sport, you've got to have mass participation events, but you also need to have elite events so people really get a sense of how cool the sport is.
Yeah, I agree. And it also, lends itself to other events coming along down the pipe. So, we had the Ore-Ida Women's Challenge, which, went on, and then we hosted the National Cycling Championships for able-bodied athletes in '86. The Criterium started in '87. And then other events, were like, what's going on in Boise? And Ironman came here. We had an 8-year run with the 70.3, as well as, other Hancapi Grand Fondo and some other big major events that said, we got to go to Boise. There's something going on there.
Well, and as a bike shop owner, at the beginning, there was road bikes, then tri-bikes, then mountain bikes, gravel bikes. You've watched this evolution and so many changes in bike technology and all of that. Talk a little about just when you first saw a mountain bike, or when you first saw that people were getting into, what are these silly bars that they're putting on the end of their bikes here to do triathlon? Some of those innovations were pretty interesting.
Well, it was really cool. Boise, if you've been here, you've seen terrain, and we have, what we call the foothills, but it's a landscape that lends itself well to mountain biking. But those trails were all sort of started back in the 60s with motorcycles. And then as the city grew, the motorcycles got pushed out. And then as the mountain bike came in online, we at our store started out with Specialized, and we had the Stump Jumper, which used a lot of, motorcycle parts. They had Magura brake levers, which were a motorcycle part. And we had perfect terrain. And the mountain bike, as soon as we put it on the floor, it just took off like crazy. It's funny that you bring up the funny aero bars on the triathlon bikes, but it was actually invented by a guy that lived in Sun Valley, Idaho, named Boone Lennon.
Exactly.
And I helped Boone do the testing on his first edition after he got some funding from Scott. And we went over with a old school time trial bike, which had a 24-inch front wheel and a 700C rear wheel. And he had a regular road bike with the clip-on handlebar, which was the first one. And we were both about the same size, and we had a hill that we ran down, and we did all sorts of different testing with it. And that was in the spring of whatever year it was. But later that year, he clipped those bars on Greg LeMond's bike, and he won the Tour de France that summer with those bars. And if you look at it closely, there's a Coca-Cola can that he cut up to use as a shim to tighten that around LeMond's bicycle. But yeah, those bars were invented in Idaho. So it's kind of crazy. We've had lots and lots of cycling related innovations and companies that have spurred out of here. And it just lends itself to, again, the sport of bike riding and the industry.
Well, it's fascinating. I was doing a triathlon in 2019 here in San Diego, and a guy drove down from Idaho, who I guess was a friend of Boone's and probably a friend of yours as well. I think he's in his 90s now, but he was talking about those early bars. And
so that guy's a legend.
Charlie French.
Charlie French. He actually on his 90th birthday did the Bogus Basin Hill Climb, which is a 16-mile climb, goes up about 3,500 feet. And he is a rock star. That guy is unbelievable. Great Nordic skier, worked as an engineer for the Scott Bicycle Company for years and years and years. But really cool stuff.
I love that. It's funny because Ned Overend was my roommate here in San Diego in the late 70s when we first heard about this thing called the Ironman. Like when we went over in 1980, when there was 108 of us, just have watched that sport go a little crazy since. And then Ned went and started doing mountain bike races, and nobody knew who the hell he was. He was beating the Stettner brothers, and everybody's like, who is this guy beating the Stettner brothers? So we're sort of part of the same history. Talk a little bit about what's really cool is the fact the paracycling national championships, July 9th through 11th, right there in Boise. It's sort of like things have come full circle. You were there when mountain bikes started. You were there when women finally got an event of their own, and now you've got you'll have hand cyclists there racing in downtown Boise.
Yeah, we offered the event a couple of times, but I was always hesitant to, make it a part of the show unless we had a certain number of riders. And we had one cyclist that lived here in town, or still lives here, Craig Cornwall, and he was a big advocate of the hand cycling, and he's a great cyclist as well with the hand cycle. And he kept pushing on me, and we added it a few times. But the big push was the Albertsons Foundation.
Yep.
Those guys are real visionaries, and they love the Challenged Athlete Foundation, and they started some funding opportunities with those guys and opened an office in Boise. And last year we had a pretty nice, a great sized field for the hand cycle, and the people loved that event. It was like go-karts going around the track. And so with that, we made a run at the Para Nationals with USA Cycling, And they said, yeah, go for it. And we added a time trial and we added a road race. And so we've got a full weekend of events for those guys. And along with that, we have the criterium going on Saturday with one of the biggest this year, probably the biggest men's field that we've ever had, with some of the most unbelievable crit riders that I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of good ones, but the Legion of LA, I just got back from Tulsa and they swept that. They took every event Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. And the Williams brothers are unbelievable. And throw that in with the paracycling, and I think we're going to have an unbelievable Saturday. But I think the Friday night and the Friday TT and the road race on Sunday are going to be frosting on the cake.
So you've got the time trial, road race, and crit. And so it's the TT on the 9th is Glens Ferry, and then the Twilight Crit July 10th, and the road race in Melba on the 11th. So you'll have a pretty good sized field for both able-bodied and for challenge athletes.
Yeah, there's going to be, I'm guessing between the two, we'll end up with about 400 cyclists.
Wow.
In and out of the area for that weekend.
And when you put on events like that, in terms of creating awareness for Boise, have you seen, obviously the area has grown a ton because of all the outdoor activities, but have you seen a huge change in terms of the awareness of what you guys are doing in Boise?
I think if you live here, you don't see it like you would if you came in from out of the area. But I remember kind of a funny story when I was working for Ironman and we were doing the 70.3. I'd have people come into the bike store, before the event looking for, parts or whatever. And I remember these two guys came in one day and they're like, wow, this is better than Boulder. And I'm like, where are you from? Then they were from Boulder, Colorado. And I always felt like Boulder, Colorado was like the mecca of cycling. And they're like, wow, this is better than Boulder. And when you come in from out of town, and when we were in retail, people would move in from outside the area and they're like, well, just moved here. I guess we have to get a bike. And so cycling is definitely a part of the community. We have all different types, mountain bikes and road bikes. The gravel bike industry is crazy popular here. And then, the BMX and the jumping and all of that stuff.
And is e-bike as big up there as it is everywhere else?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Idaho has 150 miles or 1,500 miles of gravel roads. So, I mean, the gravel road possibilities are endless here.
So when you look at the different innovations that you've seen over 40 some years, what do you look at as the most important innovations in terms of cycling?
Well, I think the mountain bike was probably the catalyst that has carried it on. I mean, the road bike had been around for years,
right?
And there was definitely a huge bike boom in the early 70s with the 10-speed. But when the mountain bike came along, that just opened it up and showed that there were people out there willing to, ride different than just on the pavement. And, the innovation in the mountain bike has been unbelievable.
So obviously you're still fit. What do you do out on the gravel bike, the mountain bike? When you walk into your garage, how many options do you have?
Well, I actually have, I have quite a few bikes. And I actually added the e-mountain bike to my quiver, not because I'm out of shape, but it's, if you haven't ridden one yet, it just opens you up to a whole different, I call it aerobic motorcycling. I mean, those things are crazy. You still have to pedal them, but the e-bikes are the next generation of crazy popular items in the bike industry. And
you get, how much training are you doing now?
I ride every day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. And it's funny. I remember interviewing a woman when e-bikes were first getting going, and she weighed 450 pounds. And her first thing to do was to buy an e-bike. and she would ride to work. And every day the goal was to ride without the assist a little further, but she always knew she had the backup. She had are you surprised at the growth of the whole e-bike side of it?
You know, it's interesting when I was in the industry, I kind of poo-pooed it at first. You know, it's the bikes that were available were kind of a cruiser style, kind of a green belt or, you know, pathway type bicycle, and the quality of them was pretty low. And if we go back, you know, maybe 4 or 5 years, we maybe sold a dozen of them in a year. Wow. And the last year that we owned the store, I think we sold about 600 of them. And, you know, the prices of those things are anywhere from low 2000s to 15,000.
Right.
So
it makes a big difference. Very cool. So when will people start coming in town for the championships?
We're going to start seeing the athletes showing up around the 7th of July.
It's going to be so exciting. So we're coming up there. We're going to bring our show. John and I will be coming up there, and we get in on the 7th, and we're hopefully doing some interviews on the, you know, 8th, 9th, 10th. And we're excited. You know, I've been to Boise, but have never been there for a race before. So what the best place to watch is where?
Well, you know, the Criterium is obviously the one where you get to see the most, and we have a great course that circles a fairly large park, and that park is, you know, you have 2 corners on it. We'll have a big screen and a beer garden, which of course beer and bikes seem to go together. So that's a great place to watch. There's a lot of shade. And if you can't make it to Boise, I don't know if you knew this, but we will be live streaming the time trial, the crit, and the road race, all 3 days. Will be live on the internet. That's
awesome. When you look back at your racing career, what do you look back at as your best race that you had?
You know, I got a number of USA Cycling championship medals. I never did get the stars and stripe jersey. I've got a couple of silvers and some bronze. But, you know, the most fun I had was actually probably in the Masters. So the 30 to 35 or 35 to 39 categories, super tough dudes, a lot of ex-professionals in there. So you really had to be on your game. And that was probably the most fun I had, was racing as a master.
Love it. Hey, Mike, we look forward to seeing you in person in just a few weeks. And thanks so much for taking time. And again, thanks for believing in the hand cycle athletes, because I think this is it's funny. Years ago, we had a wheelchair criterium here in La Jolla at what was called the La Jolla Grand Prix back in the day. And there was sort of this camaraderie between the bike racers and the wheelchair racers, because there's still equipment. You know, the bike racers were looking at the wheelchairs and looking at the components on it and the lightness and the titanium. And there was a camaraderie right away, because it's 2 different modes of transportation, but the whole idea is it's a fraternity and sorority of suffering. And if you're good at it, if you're good at it on a bike, if you're good on a hand cycle, everybody knows that you're suffering and hurting at some point.
I totally agree.
I love it. Mike Cooley has been our guest, everybody. Again, and Mike, if people want to watch the live stream, how do they do that?
They can go to usacrits.com and they'll be able to pick up the link and follow it all 3 days.
Love it. Mike Cooley has been our guest, everybody. Again, thanks for tuning in. Breakfast with Bob, not quite Kona edition. We'll catch you next time. See ya.